look for the sun because I know it's got to be the opposite end of the sky, and it always is. And that's because, and I only learned that as I got older, because when I was young, I always thought, oh, here's a rainbow, here's a rainbow, here's a rainbow, very interesting, And I never connected it to, the aura of the sun, whatever you call that. When you see an eclipse, and the body being eclipsed has that circle of light around it, that's the word I'm looking for. None of you know what that word is? Anyway, there's a word for it, but I can't think of it. But anyway, that's what the rainbow actually scientifically has to be seen as being. And the poet is reading more material here, but that's fair enough. And you say, well, there you are, Professor Eisenman. You don't have to take everything seriously. No, that is certainly true. But I think it's not something that one should. You can't just, if James made a ruling in the early church and he was the boss, and Peter and all the others hove to, and James is the closest living person to Jesus, and surely James knew Jesus better than Paul knew him. He spent his whole life with him. How are we to come along and do what Paul tells us to do when he never even knew the chap? And the people closest to him have a different view. And in fact, the only authority he's claiming is visions. He claims supernatural visions. I mean, this is mind-boggling. I don't mind if you're a Jamesian Christian, if you think that's what Jesus taught. But I can't understand how anyone could think that what Paul is writing about Jesus taught. That's something beyond my comprehension. But I may be stupid. I think the same for Muhammad. When he picks and chooses things as he does, and goes around shrieking in his work that the Jews and Christians lie, and then he takes half of the material from them. I can't understand those kind of contradictions in a person's character. I feel that there's something really seriously worrisome there going on in that person's psyche. And I think both of those people have very similar psyches and resemble each other a lot. Okay, back on to our text here. The sons of Noah went out from the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now, didn't we just have that before someplace? I think we did. Now, let's see if we can go back, because my Bible's falling apart here. I think, and line 532, when Noah was 500 years old, he became the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And then again, line 610, Noah became the father of 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Both of those things, I think, are from Elohist priestly texts. I have a feeling what's going on here is line 18 of chapter 9 is from the Yahweh's text. It seems a lot more formal, less formal, a lot more casual. The sons of Noah went out from the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth, okay. And then, yeah, here we're getting, I think, looks to me like a Yahweh's genealogy, because it's very focusing. So I think that's the reason for the overlap, the repetition. Now, the average person who takes the Old Testament just doesn't read it and worry about the repetitions. Oh, well, they just say, oh, well, the Old Testament is a repetitious document. But I think that there's more to be seen in the repetitions if one wants to pay attention to that. Ham is the ancestor of the Canaanites. I smell a story coming up. And therefore I know I'm in a Yahweh's, because he tells all the good stories. These 3 were Noah's sons, and from them the whole earth was peopled. Okay, that's a good storyteller's presentation. And Noah and his people always do things like, they're the father of silversmiths, or the other is the father of the people that build the cities, and someone else. Do you remember that genealogy earlier? This is like, here's the genealogy earlier that was a Yahweh's genealogy. It was in chapter 4 from Cain, 17, and you can see 17 to 26 or so. You can see it's the same style as that. And you can see that was all part of a text that was not cut up the way this one is. And spliced around. Okay. So now we're going to tell a story, another story, a nasty story about one's neighbors. Usually when one has a nasty story to tell in life, it's about one's neighbors or someone that one knows, not usually someone that one doesn't know. And let's be frank, people, the Hebrews are as weak as everyone else. They're not shining examples of virtue in every way. They have some high-minded things, but they also suffer from the prejudices and mindset that many that we're familiar with in our world. And here, what the Hebrews don't like are the Canaanites. They're their neighbors, and they think that their particular. We're going to get this in the Abraham stories when Abraham goes down, Lot goes down, as we may have already mentioned. But Lot goes down to Sodom and Gomorrah, and the people of Sodom and Gomorrah say to him, the people who are sheltering Lot in the town of Sodom, send out the person who you are giving hospitality to, so that we can have sexual activity with it. Modern word, B-U-G-G-E-R in slang modern word. And the point is that these Canaanites, whether they're in Sodom or elsewhere, were thought by the Hebrews to be very interested in what we now call sodomy. That kind of sexual activity, man-to-man sort of sexual activity of a very clear kind. And that's what this story is again about, because you see what they're talking about is Canaan. The fact that Ham, they're not so interested in Ham. They don't care what Ham is. They're interested that Canaan and his descendants have these sexual behavior patterns. And they disapprove of them. And they look down on them. So here's a story about that disapproval. It's a sort of it's a fun story if you're not a Canaanite. It's a cute story, but it's also pretty ill-mannered and ill-tempered. Now, should we take this historically? I wouldn't want to blame this on the poor Hebrews, all these things. I wouldn't want to blame this on God. I think that this is just Hebrew attitude towards their neighbors. But, I had a Muslim in the class, I think I've told you about him. I get it mixed up a little bit because I'm doing an Islam class and I tell stories about him in the Islam class too. And he took this class and he hated these stories. He was absolutely outraged by these stories because his view of the patriarchs, they were perfect. They were wonderful people. And he couldn't stand these kinds of stories told about the patriarchs. This is going to be a rather nasty story told